Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Good afternoon and welcome to Faith and Sport, coming to you live from AM 1270 Carolina Catholic Radio, Charlotte. And your host for today's Faith and Sport, Dr. John Acquaviva, and special guest host, Charlie Wilkinson, live here in the studios on Carolina Catholic Radio, AM 1270 Charlotte.
Hi, everybody. However, wherever you're joining us today, we welcome you. Thank you for joining us here on Faith and Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. I'm an exercise physiologist at Wingate University. Wingate is about 30 miles east here of Charlotte. And just for those folks that hear that term, exercise physiologist, exercise scientist, they're interchangeable terms. What does that mean? And what I do, in particular, what I teach on a regular basis, I teach sports nutrition. And that is, how the body works along with the nutrients and how the nutrients are used for energy and so forth. And I teach strength and conditioning, which I teach kids how to teach other people how to become bigger, stronger, faster. And then I teach exercise physiology, which is how the body changes as a result of habitual exercise, even acute exercise. That's what I do in my day job, but I have three passions outside of my family: exercise physiology or exercise science. But I love my faith and I love sport, and that's why we're bringing this show. Folks, as you know, if you've been listening to us in the last couple of weeks, Ed Billick has been with me on the air total for about 2 years now. He was previously with me in Radio Maria, and then the first 3 weeks here on Faith and Sport. But he stepped away to do another project, and a buddy of mine is in town. I respect his knowledge of sports, and he's a faithful guy himself. We're going to learn more about him, but I want to introduce Chuck Wilkinson and welcome him to the show. Chuck, thank you for being here. I appreciate this.
Exercise scientist, John, really? I'm just a buddy of John's. My name's Charlie, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, this is great. I've been looking forward to this all week. In fact, Charlie came in late last night, and he called me yesterday because he had car trouble. And I go, "You mean you're not coming for the show?" Like, I haven't seen him in years, but this is great that he's here. And folks, we've got a good show for you. Got all kinds of things going on. So let me tell you what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do the weekend headlines. We're going to bring back guest Carlos Herrera, and that hits Charlie and I in a certain way. But he's a certified soccer coach, and after he was on the show a couple weeks ago talking about the ethics and character and morality involving the sport of soccer, but he spoke to us in general. After the show, I talked to him. I think actually it was the next day. He goes, "John, I had so much more to say." And I go, "Well, then come back on the show." So he's going to rejoin us for part two, I should say, in a few minutes. So stay tuned for that. After Carlos Herrera, we're going to talk about this week's hit or miss. Then we're going to do the quick Q&A with Dr. A, where Charlie shoots a few questions at me, and then we just banter about in the world of sport. And we're going to do something new this week. We're going to do what's called the sport characteristic of the week. And I have to admit, if time permits for that. And then we have, our famous Cathlete of the Week, which is brought to us by Brand RPM. Thank you for the guys at Brand RPM. We're going to do and finish up, as we always do, with our Cathlete of the Week, which is the combination of two words in our language here at Faith and Sport, and that is Catholic and athlete. I think I almost said Cathlete again. Chuck, let's get to you.
I don't think you need to explain that. It's pretty pithy.
I don't know. Ed is always like, "John, what does that mean?" And that's one of the ways he keeps you on the straight and narrow. Hey, listen, folks, if you have a question for me or Charlie or Chris, in fact, especially our producer Chris, if you have an Elvis question and about the sports that Elvis liked to play, Chris could answer that question. But no, if you guys have any general questions for us, contact us at 704-596-4900. Chris will either bring you on the air, or you can leave your question with him, and then he'll just relay it to me. Or you can tweet me at jacquaviva1, and that's the number 1. Or you can email me at faithandsport. That's A-N-D in the middle of that, faithandsport at wingate.edu. So thanks again for joining us, folks, here on Faith and Sport, here on Carolina Catholic Radio. Chuck, we're longtime friends. We've known each other. Right off the top of your head, how many years have we known each other, do you think?
28.
Did you figure this out on the way down?
No, I'm just guessing.
I think that's right on the mark. I think we met in about 1991 or 1992. So you and I have been friends for a long time. Charlie's a big-time rugby player. He represented the United States in international plays. Heck of a fly half. That's one of the positions that he played and starred at. And I got to know Charlie through a mutual rugby friend, and him and I have been buds ever since. We just hit it off. And as much as anything, we're both big baseball fans. And I think we're kind of old souls at heart. Would you agree with that?
Old school baseball, sure.
Well, but even like just everything, right? Like sometimes you probably, like me, enjoy talking about yesteryear rather than what's going on today in the world of sport. Like you must have loved Baseball by Ken Burns, right? The first couple innings.
Yeah. That's special. Sure.
Yeah.
Ken Burns, all those things were great.
Oh, yeah, but especially baseball was fantastic. So, Chuck, you drove 6 hours from North. By the way, normally it takes folks around 7.5. But Charlie came a secret route that only James Bond and Batman know about. But also, the
speed limit is 70. I just went the speed limit, but it was hard for me to go that fast the whole way. I'm not used to 70, being in India.
Yeah, that's right, being in India. So tell the folks why you're in India, Charlie.
So I'm on mission in India. I'm an older fellow, and when I was older, I had a lot of experiences. I went through a divorce and basically lost my children. You don't get to raise them if you're not home every day. So then I heard, after 20 years after that, I heard this catechesis. It came from a charism in the Catholic Church called the Neo-Catechumenal Way, and I heard this catechesis, and basically it just grabbed me, and I just kept coming and started participating in this community. I would say the main thing I learned, or the first real experience I had, was that, I always was destroyed by the fact that my wife had left me. And that just really marked me. But after listening to this catechesis, and also I judged her for leaving me. I'm like,
yeah.
I blamed her for my woes. And listening to this catechesis, I was able to realize that she didn't leave me because I wasn't the best husband or provider or all these things, which is what I told myself, which the devil told me. But really, she left because I judged her so much. Maybe she didn't raise the kids the same way as me and everything. I was always judging her. And that's why she left. And so I could see that I was really the one responsible for the divorce. And so this really helped me. And I just kept receiving experiences like this in the Neo-Catechumenal Way. In other words, this idea that the truth really does set you free. But before I could receive any truth, I have to have an experience of being loved, of knowing that God loves me as I am, as my sin, full of arrogance, full of someone that would judge, his spouse and all of these things. And eventually I stood up to go on mission, to study in a seminary anywhere in the world. You sort of have this opportunity. You go to Rome and you go to a retreat, and then they say, the one question they always ask you is, are you willing to go anywhere? And I said, yeah. And they said, okay, India. And I went, oh no.
Not India. Like anywhere, but exactly. No, you shouldn't say anywhere, but.
No.
So you're in seminary. This is your 4th year, correct?
Correct.
And you will be ordained a deacon in 2 years. Am I correct with that? Or about?
Possibly.
Okay, if God willing, right?
No.
And just to clarify, in general, folks, a gentleman can enter the priesthood in 3 different ways. As a diocesan priest, right?
Okay.
He gets ordained by his local bishop and he serves that local diocese. Then there are what are called orders, like the Jesuits and the Dominicans, Benedict. Yeah. And then there are communities. And the Neo-Catechumenal Way is a community, and it's just one way, and they have a certain charism.
And the charism is a missionary diocesan formation. So that sounds contradictory, but so I'm going to India. And this was hard for my family to understand. They think, okay, I'm going over there to learn to be a priest, and then I'll come back to the U.S. But no, I'm going to be under the bishop in Carver Diocese, which is near Bangalore, in southern India, and I'll just be there. Now, that bishop will also know that I have a missionary formation, so I can go other places.
But then just the where you will be when you become ordained as a priest, you will probably serve here in the United States. And it's quite possible you serve maybe here in the East Coast, or you don't know.
No,
you have no idea.
John, were you listening to what I said? I'm serving India, period.
Oh, I thought you meant during the time that you were okay. So, okay, got it. I know you would think, folks, that Charlie and I never talk. In fact, he did just say that, but I thought he meant in the context of being a seminary.
You're trying to reframe, John. I appreciate
No,
it.
yeah, sorry. No, that was my way of getting back. Right, I'm good friends with you. I want to see you more often,
I know, of
right?
course. Yeah.
And how are you going to come be the guest host if you're always in India? That's my question. Folks, I'm Dr. John Aquaviva. The voice you hear is the special guest co-host, Charlie Wilkinson, a dear friend of mine. He's a big faith and sport guy himself. In fact, this is the show, Faith and Sport. Thank you for listening to Carolina Catholic Radio. So thank you for tuning in today. So let's do this, Chuck. We'll come back to your seminary formation, and I think we're going to weave a lot of that stuff that you're experiencing in today's show. So let's just talk a little bit about the weekend headlines. In Major League Baseball, the new power rankings come out. ESPN does this. Also, MLB does this. But the new number one is the Dodgers. It's not necessarily so new, but because them and the Yankees have been going back and forth all this year. But I think the big news for me is I'm a pseudo Washington Nationals fan because I spent so much time with you and your brothers and our mutual friends up in the D.C. area that I've become a silent Nationals fan, even though I was born and raised in Detroit and a serious Detroit Tiger fan. I mean, Max Scherzer is going to finally come off the DL, and he's coming back, and that's just going to raise the chances, I think, of the Nats making the playoffs.
Well, and John, you know, I had a similar conversion to the Washington sports team, the Nationals, because, you know, growing up with whatever, we know each other a long time, and I was always a Baltimore sports fan, and I followed the Orioles.
That's right.
But when the Nats came, it was the first team that the first Washington team, never the Redskins, never the Caps, the Wizards. No, but the Nationals, partly I think Frank Robinson was one of their first managers and
right.
when they came here. So
wasn't he their first manager?
He was their first manager.
He was.
Yeah.
I love that choice as well, by the way.
Yeah. So I'm rooting for the Nats, and I'm worried about them choking a lot, but, you know, because we saw it the other day. But hey.
Aren't we all? We always worry about our team choking, there's no doubt. You know, my wife says, it's so funny. It's a little frustrating, but mostly it's funny. Whenever my team loses, she just looks at me and goes, oh, so they choked. Like, that's what she'll say. If the Michigan Wolverines lose, if the Red Wings lose, she'll go, oh, they choked. And after the first year of marriage, I started just going, yeah, they just choked. Like, I didn't want to explain. She didn't care, and I didn't want to explain it to her. In the world of golf.
She knew it got under your skin, John. I think that for sure.
I hope she's listening right now. She's giggling her head off right now. Justin Thomas wins the BMW Championship. In fact, he stands atop of the FedEx standings. There's only one more tournament as far as that goes. I think they win $15 million to win the...
No one cares about the FedEx, John. Keep going.
I know. In fact, I had Ed explain it last week, and I just go, does anybody... I think people are tuning out at this point. In the NBA, I think it's interesting. The Lakers are seeking permission to speak with Dwight Howard. Why? I don't know. But it's because DeMarcus Cousins... This is the big story. This past week in the NBA, they signed DeMarcus Cousins to a one-year deal, and he tears his ACL. And this is the Lakers, of course. And they need somebody to replace him.
Clippers.
Dwight Howard's not the answer. I'm just saying. Sorry, Lakers. He's just not the answer.
John, I'm saying Clippers. L.A. Clippers.
What do you mean? What
the basketball team.
Yeah, of course. But in what reference are you making? No,
I'm saying L.A. Lakers are done.
Oh, got it. No, I don't. You don't think that, do you? With LeBron,
Clippers.
In college football, they're just in fall camp right now. Everybody's just getting ready. But this Saturday are the first two games. Yeah. Miami plays. I think Miami plays Florida. It's a pretty big game coming. Yeah, and there's only two games this weekend.
I've been in India. I didn't know.
Yeah. In fact, I've been here, and I still don't know exactly. Yeah. But I know Miami plays, and I think they maybe play against. It's a pretty big game. And there's one other game, and I know Hawaii's part of that, the University of Hawaii, and that's the first two games are this Saturday, August 24th. That's early. That's really early.
Who do Tid and Tony like?
Those are personal friends of ours, folks. Chuck will talk.
And they've been on the show.
That's right. They are fans of the show, and they're guests of the show. Hey, speaking of guests, coming right up in a couple of minutes is Carlos Herrera, and he's a certified soccer coach. He's going to talk to us about a couple things, MLS, and particularly the DC United team, and he's going to talk about other things that are involving where character, ethics, and morality is involved, especially in the world of soccer. So he's always a great guest. So stay tuned for that coming up in a couple minutes. A couple more things to cover, Chuck. The NFL, the players and the owners are apparently open, and they're having talks right now to expand the amount of playoff teams from 12 to 14. Let me ask you this. One of the things they would do is so they wouldn't expand the season fully. They're going to, there's 4 preseason games. They'll go to 3, and so they have one more week of playoff. First of all, is this a good thing? And not... Is this a good thing?
I'll say this. First of all, there used to be 6 preseason games. Then now there's 4.
In what year do you think that ended? I have no idea.
1936. No, I don't know what year
maybe
it was.
Maybe about mid-'80s or
probably.
something? Okay.
Yeah, maybe
mid-'90s. Okay.
It could have been. When they went to 16, there used to be 14 games, right? I'm pretty sure they went to 16. So now they're cutting it to 3. If there's health considerations about the players getting ready and getting in shape, I mean, now your professional athlete is kind of in shape. And it didn't used to be like in the 50s and 60s when Sonny Jurgensen, drank beer and then he came out and threw touchdown passes.
I thought Billy Kilmer was a better analogy there with the weight and all that.
Okay. So I don't know. The expanding the playoff is also, I always just go to Bud Selig's decision to go to the one final game playoff, which drives me nuts.
The one playing
baseball.
game.
The one playing game. Exactly. Yeah. So they're going to do a play-in playoff. It looks like here in football.
Yeah.
So
well, ultimately,
I'm against it.
Oh, you're against it, but no, why? In a sentence or less, just why?
Yeah, just because
just too much football.
Well, pretty soon you're just like the NHL, and all the teams are in the playoffs.
Hey. Don't knock my Detroit Red Wings. That's one of the reasons they made the playoffs 25 straight years. It's fantastic.
It's good when the regular season counts for something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have plenty of.
No doubt. Folks, I'm Dr. John Acquaviva, joined in studio here by with our special guest host, Charlie Wilkinson. Thank you, Charlie, for being here. You're listening to Faith and Sport here on Carolina Catholic Radio. Let's switch gears now and go to our guest. Carlos is on the line. He is a certified soccer coach. He's been coaching soccer both in a secular venue, in a non-Christian or non-Catholic venue, but he's also coached soccer and youth sport in the Northern Virginia area, and he's got a lot of experience here. He's got a lot to say about the character, ethics, and morality in the world of sport. Carlos, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Dr. Acquaviva. How are you?
Carlos, Carlos, it's hard not to laugh and especially smile with you, me, and Charlie all in the same set of microphones. This is great. And
I don't know what to call Charlie. What's his title? Missionary Charlie?
Chuck.
Chuck, what is your title?
or because he taught you in high school, you can call him Sir.
I taught him and coached him.
That's
and
right.
He was a heck of a football player. And I don't know why John keeps saying certified soccer coach. I can certify that Carlos knows what he's doing. He was a good athlete.
Well, the funny thing is I'm listening to you guys off air.
Sure.
And I'm here, and I'm thinking to myself, the irony of having John Acquaviva, Charlie Wilkinson, and myself on the phone, because the whole reason that I know John 100% is because of Charlie Wilkinson. He may not know this.
I know.
But when I was
never
a
told you
student in high school at O'Connell High School as a senior, Charlie was one of my history professors.
Teachers. Okay.
And he used to talk about his rugby experience, and he would play Duck Brothers, and I believe I don't know if you played on the national team, but you were very big in the rugby. When I went to the University of Maryland my first year, I didn't feel like I was big enough to play football at Maryland for sure, and soccer I think it was too late, and I thought they were pretty good at soccer. So there they have on the first day you could join different clubs, thought about water polo, and then I came across the rugby table and said, you know what, I'm going to play rugby just like Charlie. And I signed up, played rugby in college, transferred to George Mason, and that's where I met John Acquaviva playing rugby. And I was so impressed with John and his character and his level of intensity that after I graduated, and this is a story for all your listeners, after I graduated from college, I happened to be a youth minister, and we go to O'Connell. They were having this diocesan event, and there I am, and with whatever parish I was with, I happen to look across the auditorium, and I see John Acquaviva, my fellow rugby player. And I went up to him, and he's like, John, he's like, Carlos. I go, you're Catholic? And he asked me, are you Catholic? And we had no idea that we were Catholic, and there we were, and we've been lifelong friends ever since.
Way to evangelize, guys.
That's right. I know. In fact, of course, the funny...
Way to let your faith show.
That's right.
Well, that's why the irony of you being the missionary, and here we were.
I'm the worst of all three of us.
No,
it's good.
No, it's true that my guess is, Carlos, and I don't think this is putting you on the spot in any way, but you were at the time were probably going to Mass weekly, right? When you were at George Mason.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, and I was going to Mass.
Well, I was going to Mass fairly regularly. I don't know if it was weekly, but it was a couple times a week, and then it went up to weekly when I was a youth minister, and then tapered down now that I've made myself more busy.
Yeah, of course. But no, the reason I say that is we were fully in the Catholic faith at the time. It's just that on the rugby pitch and the atmosphere of rugby, Catholicism in your faith just generally doesn't come up. But that was one of the things that connected you and I, Charlie, and of course, it forever connected Carlos. I mean, seriously, I was so thankful for that diocesan event because he's a dear friend of mine, as you are. And
we're thankful for Charlie, because if it wasn't for Charlie,
that's right, none of us would be here.
I'm taking all the credit.
And so, brother, we have lots to talk about in only a little bit of time, but let's go ahead and get started. I want to start internationally or nationally in the soccer scene. Now, one of the things that fascinates me, Carlos, is, and I talked to you about this on the phone the other day when we were preparing for the show, and I said, one of the things that I was so much impressed with in any sport is when David Beckham came over. What was the club he was playing for in England? What was the last club he played for before he came over to the Galaxy?
Oh, of course you're asking me that question.
Sorry.
I wasn't prepared for that one.
No, don't worry about it. But he was playing over, and he was on the national team. He was an international star, and he came over to the Galaxy.
He's married to a Spice Girl.
That's right. He's married to a Spice Girl. Very good, Chuck. And he came, and the second he got on the field, and you and I were watching this game together, Carlos, and I'm sure I said to you, the whole level of the game for the Galaxy in particular rose the second he got on the field. He was like an orchestra. What's the guy with the baton? The
conductor.
The conductor.
Yes.
Do you remember that, Carlos? He was.
Yes.
You go over here. I'm going to kick it, and you could just see the whole level of the game just went up. And I thought it was. And I'm not even a big soccer guy. And I just go, and you go, oh yeah, you got that exactly. Like the whole level of the game went up. And here's the question I want to ask you, Carlos. Wayne Rooney has since come over from Manchester United, and he's playing for your DC United. Most of these international players, they have some impact. But what's your thought on that? Like, what type of impact do they have when they come over to a lesser league, so to speak, MLS, Major League Soccer?
Well, it's significant. I mean, you go back to David Beckham, and he actually played for Manchester United as well. So I'm sure Beckham was there when Wayne Rooney was playing, because they both ended up playing for Manchester United, and I'm sure they overlapped. And Wayne Rooney was at Everton before he came over to MLS, and the impact, not as high profile as Beckham, because Beckham has this charisma about how good-looking he is,
right.
And everybody. I mean, the amount of fans that increased throughout all the stadiums that LA Galaxy played where Beckham was. I remember when he came to play here at DC United at the RFK Stadium, which was a terrible stadium. People were talking about they were going to get tickets to see David Beckham, and that's how it was at every particular event. But having Wayne Rooney here has made a tremendous difference. The fans were excited. It helped them with kicking off their new stadium. I'm sure in part they brought him in because of that, and it has completely changed the level of intensity and play and effort that United has shown in its first season.
Is he worth it? Like, he makes a lot of money. In fact, my guess is he makes a lot more than even the next best player in the team. Is it worth bringing over a guy like that?
Well, let's talk about the money. So the team salaries for the total team salary 2019 is $10 million.
That's the cap.
That's the cap. Wayne Rooney makes $3.5 million per year, and the next guy makes $787,000. And there's only there's only 5 people that make more than $500,000, and everybody else, makes less than that. So the average salary is about $265,000 without Wayne Rooney in there. So he clearly, making 30% of the total salary, is made a tremendous impact. I don't know if financially it's made an impact, but in order to kick off a new stadium, sell tickets, sell merchandise, I'm sure it's been worth it. And I know that they're disappointed that they're going to lose Wayne Rooney at the end of the year.
But you know what's interesting is this idea of marginal utility and David Beckham coming over. And he was such a big star.
Yeah.
And it just,
huge.
And the way you described it, it just makes a lot of sense that he really had an impact. But then Wayne Rooney, I don't know if he has the same impact this far, this many years after, and to garner such a huge portion of the total cow.
Yeah, I know. That was a great stat.
Plus, I had never heard of him until John mentioned him before, this thing, Carlos. So, but that just shows you, I don't know much about soccer.
But we got to give him credit. He was in India for the last several months. So Carlos, I think that's great. That let me finish the conversation about Rooney with this. Is he headed back to England?
He is. He's actually going to go. He has signed a contract with a team in the second division, so he's not even the Premier Division, but it is a club that he's going to go play for so that he can essentially get experience as a manager.
Got it.
And that's where he's going.
So he wants to work in the front office. He doesn't want to coach.
Yeah, so, he's going to be a player, what they call a player manager or player coach. He's going to join Derby County in the English Championship League.
Yep.
And he's got a contract for about a year with an option to play. He's given up his number 10. He's going to play number 32, and then he's also going to coach or assist. But he's working to become, I think there they call it a manager when you're a coach. So I think he's going to get his experience to be able to coach.
Yeah, he's
looking and ironically, he's replacing David Lampard. David Lampard was a big national player, and he played for Manchester United as well. He was the previous coach for the team and went on to play and sign for, I believe it's Chelsea, to coach Chelsea this year. So it's clearly a stepping stone for these guys.
Sure. Folks, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Faith in Sport radio show here on Carolina Catholic Radio Network. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva with special guest host Charlie Wilkinson, and on the line with us today is, once again, Carlos Herrera, certified soccer coach. He was on the show, if you recognize his voice and some of the stories via soccer or about soccer. He was just on the show just a couple weeks ago, and like I mentioned, he said, hey, how about a part 2? Actually, he didn't say that. He just said, I have that much more to say. And I said, well, come on, man, let's do part 2. So let's switch to something that might be a little more appealing to the ears of our listeners, Carlos. And let's talk about how people cheat, because one of the things I want to do, I want our listeners to take a look at sport through the lens of the Catholic Church. In other words, there needs to be, when we step onto the field, when we step onto the court, when we step onto the track, there needs to be a risen conscience like there is in everyday situations, everyday work situations and familial situations and so forth. And we want to bring character, morality, and ethics to the sports world as well. And you and I were talking about this off air a couple of days ago. And Chuck, listen to this story. This is really kind of devious, right? My brother Dave and I were talking. His son is highly involved in Little League, right? And this was a couple years ago, so this might have been T-ball. But either way, it was probably like what they call coach pitch, right? Like where they just toss the ball over and then they just let them hit it and field it and so forth. And Dave said this one team is so, and I'm going to use the word devious. They're in the first base and the third base coach's box. The coaches are, right?
Sure.
If the ball's hit down the third baseline, for instance, the coach in the third base box, who's for the person that hit the ball, right? That's how it works in baseball.
Yeah.
He's yelling, let it go, let it go, let it go. And when the kid fields it, if he does feel it, he switches to, let's go, as if he were just mispronouncing something.
Sure.
And I said to David,
John, that's devious.
I said, Dave, you're kidding. He goes, I'm dead serious. So I know it's shocking, isn't it, to hear that story? Carlos goes, what did he do? And I had to say it again. And he goes, no, I got it. But, so let me ask you this, Carlos. Soccer can't quite cheat in that same manner, but how can players or coaches cheat in soccer?
Well,
how have you cheated,
story
Carlos?
That
you don't have to.
I think is a big deal. And I think it happens frequently in all sports and youth sports. I think there are coaches who are more concerned about winning, parents that are more concerned about winning than they are about their kid getting an experience, and playing and sportsmanship is not emphasized a lot in youth sports, although it's becoming more so, right? Like the whole concept of win at all costs is kind of been thrown out the window as, prehistoric. But in soccer...
Where are you living, Carlos, that you think that's being thrown out as prehistoric?
No, Carlos... why would you say that? And of course, I'm encouraged that you said that. But
exactly.
What?
Well, I'll give you a sense. I mean, when I was coaching youth soccer in Virginia and Northern Virginia in the youth leagues, they were requiring that the coaches go through the sort of training of fair play training. And there's a couple organizations that they have, and that you'd have to sit for like 4 hours and, get, quote unquote, a certification that you did this class. And basically the emphasis was, win at all costs is not healthy for kids, it's not good, and you shouldn't do it.
Sure.
And you had to go through that every 2 years. But there was an emphasis away from that. Now, Charlie, I know that you would concur with this, but human, the human condition, that's really hard to overcome some of those practices that we've done for a long time.
Very good.
There you go. So if you want to know how you cheat
in soccer in particular, Carlos, because it's
on the youth level, again, I think it's mostly you could say that cheating would be a form of it, although it's on a gray scale. Like, if you're a youth coach, whether you're a volunteer or a paid coach, technically in youth sports you want everybody to play. But most people who are coaching, they like to play their best players, and they'll sit their kids that are more of sometimes a liability for your team.
Of course,
they'll sit, and so you could say that's a form of cheating, if you will, because one coach may be rotating everybody around,
sure,
and he might lose because of it, and the other coach wouldn't rotate everybody around to have equal play. So the best players will play. He wins. He feels good. His parents feel good. And the other coach gets stuck with, well, I'm trying to get all my kids to play.
Right.
And he might even be looked down upon with his players, his coaches, his parents, that, he doesn't perform as well.
Got it. And there's some on-the-field stuff, too, that occurs. And it's probably more of because the coaches can't, like that example I gave with T-ball or baseball, the coaches, they have control over who's on the field and so forth, the rotation you're talking about. But the players do what's called, I just lost the term, falling, or what do you call it again?
Yeah, so which I'm sure Charlie and anybody else who's not necessarily a soccer fan thinks this is the worst part of soccer,
yeah,
which is this whole concept of diving.
Diving, of course.
Diving, of course. When you see the World Cup, you go crazy.
Yeah.
And if you look at the professional sports, some of these guys barely get touched, and they roll around like 10 or 15 times, grab the other leg instead of the leg that was kicked. And
we don't do that in rugby, do we, Carlos?
No, I know. That is so foreign to... No, Carlos, let me ask you this. You are a soccer guy. Like, you played rugby, you could play other sports, but I think at the heart of it, that's where a great bit of your heart is, right? You've been coaching it for a long time, you've been involved in it, and you're good at it and so forth when you play. But when you watch the World Cup or an MLS game, Carlos, are you forgiving with the diving, or are you like, is it more and more frustrating as the years have gone on?
Oh, to me, I'm a purist. I love competition. So anything that detracts from competition and fair play to me drives me crazy. And I will comment to my brother who's sitting next to me or whatever, and I'll just say, I just can't stand it. I hope they start cracking down on this more. And to a credit, MLS, and I know even on FIFA on the national, like
That's
one
right.
of the things that you watch, like if there's a corner kick, you'll see the defensive players grabbing the shirts of the other guys, and one of the problems that they say with soccer is there's not enough scoring. Well, if you let the defense grab a shirt, which is illegal, right?
Yep.
You're going to have less scoring. So it's kind of like you got to clean it up a little bit so it's more fair, more entertaining, and more offense oriented. But they're really, and they're starting to clean it up. But it drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's actually good to hear, because being, you're a fan, but also you said you're a purist. But I want to hear more people complain about it, because if FIFA and MLS officials hear that their fans are more frustrated, that's what's going to make the change, right?
And there's a culture though of falling down. Like if you had a chance to do that and get a penalty on an opposing player, you might even get in trouble with your teammates for not acting it out.
That's right.
Well enough. And it's
exactly right.
Also, but you can reverse this trend, because I've seen it in the NBA with the traveling call, and still they don't maybe call it enough like they do in college and high school. But
right.
it's called much better now. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Better.
What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's taken a long time. It's taken a heck of, it's literally decades.
No, I agree.
But I do think it's getting better. But you know what I think it should be like, Carlos? In the NFL, where they'll call the penalty, right? Like, let's say it's a late hit or it's a malicious hit, unsportsmanlike, whatever. But the key to that whole thing, and the reason that it's probably taken a turn for the better, is that they review the tape after the game, and penalty, both in fine and suspension, can come after the result of the play. And I think that's what they should do in soccer. But Carlos, let's face it, they'd have to go through a lot of tape with each game, wouldn't they?
Well, they're actually starting to do that now with the introduction of video review in soccer, which they just implemented, I think, last year. And I don't know if it's in the test year, but basically they will review, and I think the coach has questions or particular tactics that could be reviewed, and they will review penalties like this, particularly in the box now. The other team could say he was tagged, touched, or he was pulled down, and if he wasn't, the other guy will get a red card. So they're making an effort to clean it up, and the purists can't stand having video review. But for me, like there's so many in soccer because the scoring is so few. A guy falling down and getting pulled down in the box is such an important change in the score that can be that it's important to get it right, I think.
This is a question as much as it is just a thought maybe to think about. A couple of years ago, Charlie, you and I were talking about ethics and morality within sport. And I remember you said to me, and it was rhetorical to a degree, and you just go, is it immoral when the offensive lineman holds? And it goes with the diving in the game, too. Is it something that's helping your team, or is this immoral? Is this unethical? And of course, Charlie, why don't you go first on that? What was the answer to your question? Is it immoral to hold?
No.
Careful, there are a lot of athletes that might get affected by your decision, Charlie.
No, you have to cheat. No, but I'm joking. But you're trying holding whatever. Sometimes you can do it
traveling, whatever.
Personally, sometimes you can do it maliciously, sort of on purpose. Sometimes you do it by accident, whatever. Or sometimes you do it to protect your quarterback.
That's right.
That's right. Your quarterback would say, "Yeah, it's immoral if you don't hold." That's what they're going to say. So
loosely used immoral.
Or they'll say it's immoral if you get caught.
No, exactly. But I like John's experience as a ref in rugby. He was reffing the women props, and you have to tell the story.
Maybe another
things. Anyway,
maybe another time. No, well, this is good. You know what I thought you were going to go to, but Carlos, before I respond to is it immoral? What's your thought? Like when you take a dive, is it immoral?
Well, morality has, there's murder and there's, I took 50 cents.
There's venial sin and there's mortal sin is what you're saying, Carlos. This is a Catholic show. We can go there.
Clearly not. I would be very humble to say that I don't think it's on that level of mortal sin unless, but again, fairness. Athletes will say, I think football players will say, well, we'll do what we can get away with, right? Like it's every team at that level wants to win, your livelihoods. So, and it's hard because both teams are doing it, so it's kind of like, well, if we want to take the moral high road, we're going to get beat because the other teams are going to do it and the refs aren't going to call it. So it's one of those where, I think if the policing is better, the reffing is better, which stops the game more. So it's kind of like, are you going to call every penalty? So
no, you're right, Carlos.
I don't think it's...
You hit the nail on the head. It's because I thought Charlie was going to get to it, but you actually hit the nail on the head. That's why there's referees.
That's right? When the student becomes the professor at some point, right?
That's right. No, this is.
But women are more moral than men in sports. Come on, John, you have to tell the quick story. Just doesn't matter what the rule. A girl's violated a rule, and
that's right. It was. I was calling a game. It was women's college game. And, the key to the refereeing, especially for a rookie ref, which I probably was at the time, maybe in my second year, and, it's the engagement of the two sets of forwards that come together and they lock their shoulders in their head in what's called the scrum. And it clearly was wrong, right? And somebody was going to get hurt. And I said, break. And they broke away. And I looked at the one girl and I said, to the one team who I thought was doing something wrong, and I said, what happened there? And she just goes, I put my head in the wrong place, but I didn't mean to. And I looked at the other girl across from her and she goes, yeah, she didn't mean to.
It could have been a penalty, but she didn't mean to, and John factored that in.
That's right. And of course, this is over stereotype, but I just would never have heard that from guys, right? I thought that was great.
Well, the irony of what you just said is if you watch the Women's World Cup, I'm sure there's statistics, but the amount of diving that occurs in the Women's World Cup is so much less. You'll actually
that's a great
fighting
point.
through, if they're getting tackled, And you just don't get that, although it's starting to creep in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You don't get that in the women's game a lot.
Well, Carlos, we have quickly run out of time. I knew that would happen. As soon as you got on the phone, I'm like, oh, no, Charlie, Carlos, and I all know each other, and we've known each other for decades.
For hours.
No, I know, but listen, why don't we I'll promise you part 3 sometime in the near future, and then we'll just do one more conversation, and we'll just keep calling it parts, because you and I have so much to talk about, and you have so much to share with our audience. So listen, thank you for coming on the show. Come back again soon, and you take care, buddy.
My pleasure, John, and it was great being a part of it, Charlie. Charlie, great talking to you, great hearing you.
Great talking to you, Carlos. Take care.
Folks, that was Carlos Herrera, certified referee from the Northern Virginia area. He's been involved in sports his whole life, but now he serves as a soccer coach for youth, and he's had a whole lot of experience with the players, with coaching, with administration, with referees. I thought he has all kinds of great insight, and I should have just the Carlos Herrera show once a week. I mean, I could have this show, Faith and Sport, and then maybe on Fridays we can come back together and just have the Carlos Herrera show. I think he's great. So thank you for joining us today here on Carolina Catholic Radio. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. If you have a question for me, you can do one of two things. Chris, the producer, he'll take your call. He can just take your question, and Chris can relay it to me, 704-596-4900, or you can just tweet your question at JAquaviva1, that's the number 1, or you can email me at faithandsport, that's A-N-D between faith and sport, faithandsport@wingate.edu. Chuck, I told you it's already 40 minutes into. Did this go quick or what?
It's going quick, man.
Oh yeah, so let's do this. Let's do the this week's hit and miss. So I'll just give mine,
okay,
and then we'll move on to the quick Q&A with Dr. A. And this has to do with professional sport, but just ultimately how you get these glimpses of that it's for the love of the game, and that these guys and these gals just love to be there. And it has to do with my beloved Detroit Tigers, who, by the way, this might even be shocking to you, I think at last check were, by 7 games, the worst team in Major League Baseball. Right? They're awful, right? They're awful. Right. They are insured the first pick next year. That's one of the good things about it.
Who's the GM?
I don't even want to talk about it, brother. So, Alex Avila. So last week, the Detroit Tigers were in a spiral downward. They had lost 7 of their last 8 games. They've gotten rid of, the Justin Verlanders, Nick Castellanos, all these good players over the last 2 years. They've had a fire sale overall in the last 5 years. It's why one of the reasons why they went from the World Series just a few years ago to they're the worst team in baseball. Last week, they had a walk-off home run by Brandon Dixon, right? And I watched the video. I didn't see the game live, but I was watching the video. I was like, oh, my Tigers won. I'm going to watch how they won. And it was a walk-off home run, which means the game was tied or they were behind, and the home run ended up winning the game. And the Major League Baseball, in their videotape, they showed 2 particular pieces of tape. They showed the actual home run live, right, or in regular speed. But right after he hit the home run, they cut and they showed the dugout from the side, so you could see the faces of all of the Tigers. And they're waiting for the pitch to Brandon Dixon. He hits the home run. They looked at each other, hugged each other, smiled, high-fived each other, and ran onto the field. And if you just saw that tape, you would go, did they just win the World Series? But it's just great, right? These are all professional athletes. These are professional baseball players. And it really shows ultimately that these guys, right, they just want to win, right? They're there to win the game, and they were so excited that they did. And nothing probably tasted sweeter than that home run, because they had lost 7 out of 8 games.
And that is an element of a winning team, right? Of winning sports, baseball, football, whatever. Just a quick, I was watching a documentary on Belichick, Bill Belichick, the New England Patriots coach, and a lineman had picked up a fumble for New England and scored a touchdown. So that's kind of a big moment for the team, right? But guys be laughing and joking, but like only one guy came up and like hugged him and whatever and like celebrated with them, right?
And who was it?
And I don't know who it was.
Oh,
but the point of the thing was Belichick was getting on his team going, what's wrong with you guys? That's a defensive lineman scoring a touchdown. Everyone should be cheering like the Tigers walk-off home run. And nobody.
Do I have to tell you guys this is the time to celebrate?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. But no, and no, there's no doubt about it that the level, the volume was turned up a little bit on that victory because they've been so bad. And also, the guys are, they're really trying to hang on to major leagues, right? Like, one of the good things about teams like the Tigers is that people get exposure from the minor leagues that they wouldn't normally have, right? Because they traded all their major league players away.
They're 7 games behind the Orioles?
Yes.
The Orioles are my old baseball team.
No, Chuck, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that's our this week's hit or miss, and that was a hit for sure. I love that part of it. Let's move on, Chuck. Let's do the quick Q&A with Dr. A. I understand you have a few questions for me. Shoot them at me one at a time.
Here we go. The first one, and I don't think it's by chance this question is here because of my history. Does the Catholic Church care about sports gambling?
Okay, go ahead. You're going to have a...
No, I'm just going to tell the viewers that, in my former life, I used to be a big gambler. I used to actually be a bookie. People were always trying to put bets in through me because I could get bets in. And then finally I was like, these idiots keep losing. I have to collect. So I started taking bets myself. So anyway, I was heavy into sports gambling.
Yeah.
And now you could say maybe I'm heavy into the church. I'm on a mission in India. And so this is an important question. Does the Catholic Church care about sports gambling?
They do. In fact... but before I get to that, the reason that this is a viable question, the reason that this is a legitimate question is for two things which are strongly associated. Fantasy sports has never been bigger. There's literally tens of millions of people that play just fantasy football every year. Millions of people are involved in fantasy baseball. It started in Italy, believe it or not, with soccer. This is not a new thing, but more and more people get into fantasy sports. And online places like FanDuel and Yahoo, ESPN, they all offer it, and some offer more money than others and so forth. It's a huge thing. But it's also been big talk in the last couple of years that not only should it become legal, but the actual major league teams and associations should adopt it and embrace it. And so, yeah, and of course the NFL, the NHL are at kind of the top of the list, and NBA's right there with them, and they want to have a site to bet on their websites. In other words, at NBA.com, at NFL.com, they want to be able to play the bookie, and of course, they want to take a piece of the action because they know so much action occurs.
That's what a bookie does, John. He takes a piece of the action.
So that's what they're interested in. But let me read directly from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, 2413, and this is what it says. Games of chance, card games, etc. It should say football games and baseball games, or wagers that are not in themselves contrary to justice. They become morally unacceptable when they deprive someone of what is necessary to provide for his needs and those of others. The passion for gambling risk becomes an enslavement.
Okay, so let me just say right there. So that was my example. That's the example that I lived, that it was an enslavement and it became an idol. What's an idol? An idol is a thing that you think you get your happiness from. The only one we can really get true happiness from, eternal life, is God, Jesus Christ. But there's many, all of us have many idols. And my idol was gambling. Because if I knew that Michigan was going to lose to Ohio State, like I knew last year, it was one of the best bets of the year, then I could bet that. But I couldn't bet it because I don't do it anymore. But I maybe told that idea to some people. But anyway, so something, you want to be paid for it, and it becomes an idol because when you get it right, then you're like, yes.
And pride's greatly involved in gambling, isn't it? Absolutely. It's really intertwined.
It's enslavement is an excellent word to use.
Yeah, it is a great word.
That's because then you can go down that road where the cause of losing your house, your money, and depriving people of necessities can occur easily.
This is going to maybe be a little more personal than where we've gone. I remember it was probably 10 years ago, and I might have been in seminary at the time. And I'm not even sure I've shared with my listeners, but I was in seminary at one point for the Diocese of Richmond. No, I think I did mention it in the first week. But
he crapped out and got married. He has 4 kids now.
So you asked me, you go, no, I said to you, I said, JP made a statement, JP2 made a statement on gambling, and you perked up like you had a shot of espresso and you went, what did he say? Right? Like it was this.
What does JP2 know? I probably said something like that.
Does he know anything about Urban Meyer and the effect that he has on Ohio State against Michigan?
Right.
So I said, I just quoted, because what he did, he's paraphrased here. He said, It's okay,
right?
But it can't be an enslavement, and it can't affect your everyday life as a family guy. Like, for instance, and he just elaborated and said, if you, as a result of your gambling, can't buy your kids a gallon of milk and bread, then you have to take a strong look at that. And I remember you were quite you were relieved to hear. You were like, yeah, and you've already expressed where you were with that. But
Right.
But I remember that probably far more vividly than you do. I thought that was great. But let's listen. Let's move on to the next question, and then we can, if we have time, we can come back to that.
New rules for NBA agents included every agent has to have a bachelor's degree.
That's right.
But now that criteria has been lifted. Was this a good change?
Okay, so just last week, one of the questions that Ed asked me was, is this, is the new rules for the NBA, is this good, bad, or are you indifferent about it? And the three major rules, even though there's a list of them, but three major rules were, you have to have a bachelor's degree, right? It usually takes at least 4 years to do that. You have to be certified by the NBA Players Association. In other words, right, this is an organization within the NBA, and they have to say, you're good to be an agent to our upcoming guys or incoming guys. And you have to pass an in-person exam. Right after the show, I think it was literally within a half hour after the show, we were riding home, and Ed got a tweet or something, and he goes, look at this. They just lifted the bachelor's. It's no longer. And what I said on air was, I think it'd be I think I said this on air. I know I was thinking this, is I don't think it's a bad idea. But what they could have done, because people like Rich Paul, the Draymond Greens, and Anthony Davis, and LeBron's agent, he doesn't have a bachelor's degree, and he raised a big stink, and his people raised a big stink, and a lot of people raised a big stink, and they thought it was discriminatory in some regard, right?
Yeah.
And so the NBA felt pressure. But give your example. It used to be a bail bondsman.
Right. Well, while I was a bookie, then another job I had was bail bonding. But they did that with bail bonding. They used to make us take insurance exam to be a property casualty insurance agent. So you had to study for an exam, and it's just a screening thing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good bail bondsman. Just like the bachelor's degree doesn't have much to do with being an agent, but it is a screening thing. And what we found that happened was all kinds of people came into the bail bonding business. They were operating unethically. They were trying to get leads from
clients and so forth. Yeah.
Well, no, from like the prison officials and bribing them and all these things. And they reinstituted the exam, but it was sort of a little bit late to shut the door. So here in this NBA situation, I mean, to have a bachelor's degree, I think is fine. I think anyone that's already an agent who's got clients like you just
LeBron and
could
AD,
easily be grandfathered in, as we were talking before, John. I don't think that's a problem. But I think these kinds of screens are fine.
I do too. There's a lot of jobs out there, and this is true, good, bad, or indifferent when it comes to jobs. But I remember I was talking to this one gentleman, and he said, I don't necessarily like it, but I get it when the people above me go, for this position, it's required that they have a 4-year degree. It doesn't matter what it's in.
Right.
And he articulated it well, and of course I'm in this field, and I get it just as much as anybody. But the things that we both agreed on that he talked about, he said, it shows a certain level of persistence, right? If you get a 4-year degree, and it shows a certain level of intelligence, right? Not necessarily like great, right? There's all of those things are arguable, but it does show something. It's just like anything else, right? You want your doctor to have gone through medical school. Don't you want your lawyer to have gone through law school, right?
You want to have some humanities training, and you want to.
Don't you want your priest to have gone to seminary, Chuck?
Know a little bit about theology. No, but a headhunter once told me, he goes, if you have a college degree, it just means you're trainable.
That's not bad. Okay, hey, listen, before we go on, I want to revisit this big. I thought it was the question. I thought it was the topic of the week last week, but it's worth revisiting, especially the conversation we had with the great Joe Reich. He's the football coach at Wingate University, where I teach. His brother, Frank Reich, is the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, if that name sounds familiar. And Charlie and I stopped by the football stadium today. I want to introduce you to Joe and everything. And one of the things that came up was, the question that we had from last week was, should former Clemson QB, Kelly Bryant, should he have been offered a championship ring because he played the first 4 games for Clemson? He left after the 4th game because he was benched. He ended up quitting the team, so he was still eligible for 1 more year of football. They asked Dabo Swinney, the current head coach and the then head coach of Clemson when they won the national title last year, they go, are you going to give him a championship ring? And he immediately responded, heck no. He's not on the team. And only people on the team get the ring.
Sure.
And what was your initial thought when you heard the question?
I agreed with Dabo said, in the sense that, well, you had to explain it to me, but he had quit so he could be eligible to go to another team.
That's right. Because if he played one more down, he wouldn't have been eligible.
So, I mean, but I thought it was correct, mostly because he had quit. In other words, he said, I don't want to be on this team anymore. Maybe he was putting himself first of the team, whatever. But I was fine with Dabo Swinney's decision on that.
On the way here, we were talking about it, and you articulated well what Joe Reich had said, the football coach at Wingate. Because I asked him, I go, Joe, what do you think about Kelly Bryant not getting? And what did he say?
Sure. No, I mean, Joe agreed with Dabo Swinney, but of course,
and why? Do you remember why? The number one thing he said something about the locker room, right? He goes,
"Oh yeah. No, other people cannot know you because it means something to be on the team. You have to be included.
Yeah,
just the same way." Anyway, there's an analogy in Catholicism there to communion and everything.
Oh yeah,
but, that's a little bit deeper.
But no, what he was referring to ultimately was he wants, like, his big thing is the team he has now, and he wanted to create unity through that statement.
Exactly.
But what did Joe say after that? He goes,
then he would show compassion.
That's what the word he used. Yeah,
and then maybe he might give him a ring because certainly he played for 4 games and certainly and he could do that. But
he didn't just play for 4 games, Chuck. He's the quarterback, and they're 4-0 after those 4 games, right?
No, I understand.
Yeah, okay.
He started. For
no, I'm
4
just
games.
Clarifying for our listeners.
Yeah.
So.
But anyway, it's you know what? It's a unique situation.
It is.
It requires some discernment, and a lot of times, I think Dabo Swinney might have gotten some grief from some people.
He did.
Oh, that's not very, forgiving or compassionate or whatever. And that situation requires discernment, and in the media, in the short sound bites, you don't get to, you know what I mean? To experience that, you don't get to know all the ins and outs of a particular situation. You
know what I appreciate most about what you just said? You used the word unique, independently. You didn't say it was really unique or very unique. You just used, you know how people overuse that word? They go, that was really unique. And I go, you can cut out the word really. It's just unique stands by itself. Folks, oh my gosh, the time has, we have our producer Chris just putting up the amount of fingers of the minutes we have left. We only have a couple minutes here. I want to thank you for joining us today here on Faith and Sport here on Carolina Catholic Radio. If you just joined us, listen, for the repeat of this show, it's going to rerun on Saturday at 4 and Sunday at 2. So if you missed some of the show, you can catch the rebroadcast this weekend at 4 and 2 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday, respectively. Or if you've been listening to the show and you think you know somebody that might be interested in the show, have them listen in. If they just like a sports show and they just like what we talk about, or you think they like what we talk about, just tell them to tune in AM 1270. And I think this time next week, Chris, right? Can you confirm this? We're going to be on the web, and we're going to be through the app. You're going to be able to hear this show live.
That's right.
Okay,
you can log on to the website or to the app and start hearing Faith in Sports.
And Chris, what is the cost to download that app and get on Carolina Catholic Radio Network? What's the cost?
I don't think there's any cost.
There is no
absolutely
cost.
Free.
There's no cost. It's just the benevolence of the Catholic Church. They're like, here's an app for free, folks. It's only thing we have time for is our Cathlete of the Week. He is Father Chase Hilgenbrink. Now, let me give a little background on Chase. He was born and raised Catholic. He was a college soccer player, eventually a professional player in Chile. Then he played professionally for the New England Revolution, which was his dream. His dream was to play in the MLS, the Major League Soccer, the aforementioned in our conversation with Carlos. In his first season with the Revolution, he got the strong calling to be a priest and left the team mid-season to study to be a priest at Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg, and he's studying for the Diocese of Peoria. He now serves as the assistant chaplain at the Catholic News Center at the University of Illinois in Urbana. It just says so much about the courage that he had to leave this passion of his, but also shows the strength of the Holy Spirit, and that the priesthood as a result, is a better place with him in it. And by the way, he's a friend of this show. He was on the former show, Faith and Sport, when we were on Radio Maria, and he was terrific. He loves soccer. He's great. He's great at talking about his love for the sport and his passion for the sport and so forth. But he thought it was. He knew in his heart, Holy Spirit was speaking to him strongly, and he left for the priesthood, and now he's a priest for the Diocese of Peoria.
One of the things that strikes me about this story is how you cannot decide to be a priest. You have to be called.
That's right.
And clearly, this was a case of a guy being called, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I never would have left rugby, when I was playing.
But a long time ago, yeah.
No, a long time ago, I'm saying. I mean, that's
But
really
Chuck, those
touching.
hits hurt so much hard now. When you hit it, you're like, I'll do anything for you, God. Hey, folks, the Cathlete of the Week was brought to us by Brand RPM. Get your branding gear. We have access to over 100 million products. Check them out at brandrpm.org.
But is there a Cathlete of the Year?
.com, I mean. Is there a Cathlete of the Week? There might be a
Cathlete of the Week. He should get more than just Cathlete of the Week.
You know what we can do? We can have our listeners nominate people for Cathlete of the Year. So, folks, listen, Chuck, I want to thank you. Thank you for coming all this way to visit us here in North Carolina. Good luck. And, folks, one of the reasons I want to have Charlie on the program, I would like for you, and I know that he would love it too, if you prayed for him and his ministry, him and his mission, and to keep praying for him up until the days and into his days as a priest.
Thank you very much. Yes, I need all the prayers I can get. Thank you.
Very good. Folks, I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. You're listening to Faith and Sport here on Carolina Catholic Radio. And remember, the Pope said, it's not just how you play the game, or it's whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And I know it's been said before, but it's always important when it comes from the Pope. For Charlie Wilkinson, Chris Pressler, I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. We'll see you next time on Faith and Sport.
You've been listening to Faith and Sport with your host, Dr. John Acquaviva, and special guest host, Charlie Wilkinson on AM 1270, Carolina Catholic Radio. Make sure to tune in this Saturday for an encore presentation of this broadcast from 4 to 5, and Sunday afternoon from 2 to 3. It's Faith and Sport on Carolina Catholic Radio, AM 1270, every Monday afternoon, live from 2 to 3.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.